Hey guys, welcome to another video from the Parrott Bros. Today we're going to be going over common faults and things to look for when buying a B8 B8.5 S4. Right, let's jump into it. We're talking common faults, issues and things you should look for specifically when buying a 3 litre TFSI V6 supercharged S4 or S5. We'll jump straight into some of the big ones. Gearbox. Obviously, Gearbox is a wide discussion. For the S-Tronic, there's obviously a known fault for them. Obviously, if you've got a manual, 6-speed manual, check all the usual stuff, the clutch, how it feels, etc. Make sure you can just select every gear, providing that's okay and there's no noises, you're sweet. Auto box, the biggest thing you can do, and I'll pop a little video up in a minute, is to service it. Now, the mechatronics unit is usually what fails, and that can cost in the region of £1,000 on its own without even fitting it, just either getting it refurbished or getting a new one. So I mean, you're looking at between £2,000 and £3,000 usually for the gearbox overhaul, should that have an issue. The most common thing that I've seen is lack of servicing. So make sure, if you're going to buy a car, make sure that the gearbox has been serviced on the regular intervals. If you're not sure what that is, I'll write it down on the video below, because I'm not 100% sure myself, but I will check. So yeah, make sure it's been serviced in the regular intervals. If it hasn't, then it's up to you, but I would certainly get it done, because this car actually had been done on the regular intervals. However, when we actually come to do it slightly early, we've done it about 5,000–10,000 miles early, we actually measured the liquid that came out, and it actually was a litre light. So quick one on this. When they fill the gearbox, basically they fill the gearbox without the car running. They then start it, put it into a gear, so that obviously the gear selectors move around, and then you can fill it whilst it's running. You can fill the gearbox again, and it takes about another litre. So they haven't clearly done that, which luckily for me wasn't an issue, but it is worth checking. That's the main point I'd say with the gearboxes, is the servicing. Make sure it's got regular services, and if you're not sure of it, it's been a while, when you buy it, get it serviced. So right, that's the gearboxes covered. What I will say is, when you're driving it, put it into drive, take it for a little spin. It will feel a little bit, I don't know how to explain it, a bit sluggish between the gears. It wants to go straight up to 7th, which is fine. Put it into sport, make sure it holds the gears a bit longer, make sure there's no horrible knocks and bangs. Another good thing to do is, if you find yourself on a country road, just knock it into manual and just make sure the paddles work. That's obviously one of the reasons. Here we go. So see, obviously one of the reasons is obviously you want to make sure that they work. The other reason is it's just fun as heck. But yeah, just make sure it bangs through the gears nice. It goes literally instantaneous once you get it on the right point, and yeah, by the time you're in third, you're doing 70. So be a bit careful with that one. So I'm not going to be covering the normal things you need to look for when buying a car, as if you're buying a B8 S4, I'm guessing you already know a little bit about cars, so I won't insult your intelligence there. But I will say, don't be afraid to check everything. Check everything works, check the windows work, check the doors lock, check the bonnet opens, the doors open, check the mirrors adjust, the radio, make sure that you flick through a few radio stations, etc. So don't be afraid to check all the basics like that, as at the end of the day, they're still costly should there be an issue. But I won't cover that in this video. We'll go specifically to the common faults and just sort of generally things to check on a B8 S4 S5. Carbon build-up. Now, the best thing for this is just start it, leave it idling, wait for it to settle if it's cold, and just watch the idle. Feel the car. If it's dead smooth, no issues. If there's a slight bump in the idle and it just feels a little bit rough, there's a good possibility that there's a carbon build-up. Now, the TFSI engines are known for carbon build-up, and basically all that does is the carbon builds up around the valves and stops the valves seating 100%, which is what gives you the rough idle. Now, I'll flash up a picture which I was given by CJ Mechanical of a car he carbon cleaned. He walnut blasted the carbon out, and I'll give you a before and after, and basically that is what it is. Now, that can be done. It is not an issue. It's a serviceable thing to do. They can just pop the supercharger off, and while they're doing other bits and bobs, they can carbon clean your engine. It will give you a few extra horsepower. Well, back to original at least. But it obviously comes at a price. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I would guess probably in the region of between £300 and £500. But obviously, if it needs doing, it needs doing. So that is a good thing to check whilst you're sitting there with the car running, and easy enough to do. Common faults with these is rust on the front wings. Now, it's more on the earlier models. If you've got a 8.5, I believe they sorted the issue. But basically, just if you can, obviously if it's not wet, you don't mind getting on your knees, get on your knees and have a good look around the wheel arches. Make sure there's no bubbly rust or stone chips on the inside and the outside, because they are semi-known for rusting on the front arches, which is unsightly, is annoying. And if you're buying it, you could look at, wings aren't that expensive, they're maybe £100, £150, but the paint and getting it matched, and obviously then having the whole drama with that, could cost you £600 to £1,000 just to get both front wings painted, and then obviously have to blow in the bonnet just to make sure it matches. So yeah, that's front wings. I mean, rust wise, they tend not to be too bad. Obviously, if you're buying a car from Scotland, there may be a bit more rust underneath than you'd expect, but best thing you can do is just have a good look underneath, make sure everything doesn't look like it's been sat in salt water for 10 years, and go from there. But I mean, yeah, rust wise, they're fine. It's a newer car, you tend not to see that much rust apart from on the front wings. Mapping, don't be afraid to buy a mapped car. If someone's looked after it and they've taken it to a reputable garage, there's quite a few good mappers out there that can be quite costly. Just make sure they've got a dyno graph. Make sure it has been to where they've said it's been to. If they're saying it's been to a £1,000 gearbox and engine remap, you should see at least a receipt and a graph, hopefully. I'll flash up my graph so you get an idea of what you're looking at. But yeah, you want to check that it's been to the place. Now, don't be afraid to buy one, like I said, because it's expensive. If you buy an intake system, if you buy or pay for a map, gearbox and engine map, and you were to say put an exhaust on, you could not have a lot of change at £4,000. Now, when it comes to selling the car, there could be a £500 to £1,000 difference in the price. Now, to me, that's a saving of £3,000. If it's been done at the proper place and they've got the receipts and the printouts for it, don't be afraid to certainly have a look at it, because the likelihood is if they've taken it to good places, they probably care about their car. It might have been driven hard, but then there's nothing to say that a standard S4 hasn't been driven hard already. At least if they've spent the money on it, you'd hope they'd look after it. The 3-litre V6 TFSI supercharged, there's a supercharger. Now, there's very little maintenance that goes into one of those. However, there's sort of conflicts of interest. I rang Audi and they said it doesn't need servicing. I rang my mechanic and he said that it is a serviceable part. Now, from what I can gather and what I've been told, it does take a small amount of oil, and it is worth doing at some point. I'm not sure of the intervals, but it would be worth doing. So should you get some maintenance, or if someone says it's been done, happy days. But it is always one thing to consider. It's not particularly expensive for the oil, and if you're getting it serviced anyway, then happy days. But yeah, basically when you're, so start the car, ideally from cold, see if there's any rattles, any bangs, any graunchy noises, any rough operation, and just generally listen to the car. They sound a bit ticky, because obviously it's got 6 injectors, but besides that, it should run like a sewing machine. They're pretty smooth, and what it shouldn't do, you shouldn't really get any rough operation or grinding noises from the supercharger. It should be really smooth. Again, on acceleration, if it's got an intake, it might be a bit whiny, which is normal. Whilst on the engine PCV system, check the PCV system, have a look, just make sure that all the pipes look good. If you don't know what I mean about PCV system, it's a breather system around the engine. It's little plastic tubing. It's also denotes to oil use, so if the PCV valve or the PCV is blocked, the car could use a lot of oil and they could have to top it up quite a bit, say more than once in 1,000 miles, which obviously no one wants to do because oil is expensive and it shouldn't need it. So that is one thing to check. If it's had it done, great. If it hasn't, just have a look in the bay, make sure there's no obvious signs of oil vapor, it's not oily, it doesn't look sweaty, and because that's one thing to consider, because to replace it is not an easy job and it can be a little bit costly. Also, general servicing, water pump thermostat, make sure they've been changed if the car's leggy, sort of over 100,000 miles, and if it's not, and if it hasn't had it, then it is something you may want to consider when you get it serviced, because they have been known to fail, and obviously it's quite an expensive car, quite an expensive engine. You don't really want that to happen. Besides that, engine wise, they're pretty good. They're quite snug in the bay. Pop the bonnet out, just have a good look, make sure there's no oil leaking. If you can, just check that all 6 of the core packs are the same, because they're not so much on an issue on the newer one, but it's obviously worth checking. If one's been changed, the likelihood is they might all need changing. Look for oil leaks. Again, they tend to be pretty good. The rocker covers have been known to leak, so it is worth checking from that perspective. But besides that, they're pretty good. That is pretty much everything I consider when I looked at these cars to be an issue. Now, I would recommend, if you have owned one of these, or you do own one of these, or you've looked into it and you've not seen anything that I've said, or you've seen something that I've not said, please feel free to pop it in the comments for everyone to see. That would be really helpful. I'd really appreciate it, and I'm sure so on everyone else. But besides that, obviously, like I said before, check all the normal stuff. I will do a little video in the future of just buying a car, things to check, just to give you like maybe a checklist of things to go through. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask for it to be cold when you get there. Don't be afraid to ask about oil consumption. Don't be afraid to just get in the car and just check everything. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be your car, and obviously you don't want to buy a lemon. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful, guys. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching another video from the Parrott Bros. Bye now.